Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. And thank you to the members who are here. It is an honor to join, the third budget debate sitting on this side of the Assembly chambers. I would like to start by sincerely thanking the electoral district of Belgarden, Glamorgan, for allowing me the opportunity to represent them as an assemblyman, which I think is my first priority, probably the most important of the functions that I hold. And that is extended to the entire island of Tobago. I would also like to thank, before I forget, the hard-working members of staff at the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, who, without them, we would not be able to be here providing the type of wellness, as in public health, and social protection type services that we do. I would also like to thank the extremely hard-working members of the Tobago Regional Health Authority, because without them, we would not be able to provide the kind of stellar health care services that we are able to provide. I would, though, before I go into the areas that are specific to what the division or what the TRHA will be doing for the next fiscal, I would like to take a little bit of time to simply respond to a couple of the things that were said before. And it is unfortunate that the individual who spent so much time spewing information that was downright inaccurate has chosen to not be in the House with his other colleagues to hear the responses to the many questions that were asked and to hear the correction to many of the inaccuracies that were spewed. I would like to say to Tobagonians, though, that you need to be extremely, extremely careful, through you, Madam Presiding Officer, of individuals who are willing to so frequently repeat information that they know is downright untrue, and repeat it so many times as if they themselves believe it. We definitely, Tobago, I am asking you to pay very, very, very close attention to someone who is willing to tell such untruths repeatedly and say it with a straight face. Of course, saying it because it is what is written and it is what was told, and I am assuming it is the speech that was given at the sports day when they went to South a couple of days ago. So let me correct a couple things. There is this idea that $7 million was spent by this administration, and therefore we should be in a different space, and how much each member of Tobago would get if we had given each Tobagonian that. But it's important to note that for the 21 years before we were in this position, close to $57 billion was spent in that period. And if we are talking about money spent, and if we are talking about value for money, I would think that given the $57 million that was spent during that period, billions, thanks for the correction, given the $57 billion that was spent in that period, we would not have to have been in the position that we are in now, spending 2.5 years trying to continually clean the level of mess that we found when we got in. Another thing that is said repeatedly, and again, I really, really wish that the member was here so that he could understand. There is this idea that this Tobago House of Assembly got so much more money than previous Tobago House of Assemblies, and therefore we should be happy, and therefore we should be quiet, and therefore we should just sit down and accept it and be fine. But this is basic mathematics. Mathematics that even a standard 4 or 5 pupil should be able to understand. The government of Trinidad and Tobago, the budget of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, coincidentally was increased at the same time that we got into the administration. What does that mean? And I'll break it down to small little maths. We know that we are getting, Madam Presiding Officer, the 4%, 4.03%. But 4% of $100 is $4. Simple maths. Now, if we are now looking at a number that is bigger than $100, let's just say, for example, $200. 4% of $200 is $8. Now, yes, when you look at the overall figure, the overall dollar figure, yes, the $8 is more than the $4, yes. But when you look at the percentage, it is the same 4% that we have been getting. And I again want to warn Tobagonians that somebody who is willing to play smart with that kind of foolishness is somebody who you should never, 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 never trust, because it shows that they are willing to sell your birthright. It shows that they are very willing to sell your birthright because they wear a certain party color, and that is what they have been told to say. I was hoping, Madam Presiding Officer, that I would have heard the member say that instead of repeating again the other foolish untruth about if we had taken the bill that was flawed, we would have gotten the 6.8% that bill promised. I was hoping that the member would have said that, one, he thoroughly understands that the DRC currently allows us between 4.03% and 6.9%. So if his colleagues in Trinidad were interested in giving us the 6.8%, they currently have a mechanism that allows them to do that easily. But more important than that, Madam Presiding Officer, I was hoping to hear him say very loudly in front of all of Tobago, to say to his colleagues in Trinidad that this Tobago House of Assembly, having budgeted the way we have budgeted this presentation, is deserving of at least the 5.8% that the former Secretary of Finance indicated that we should get. Particularly since when individuals who are outside of this space were asked about whether the budget presentation was a sound one, including the chamber, including the business community, including all of those people, they actually said that they thought it was a wise, honest, simple ask and that the Tobago House of Assembly should be allowed to develop in the way that we want to develop, given that 5.8% request. So, to Tobagonians, the next time you see any of the members of the minority, please ask them, why are you not advocating for Tobago to get at least that 5.8% of the budget? And I think the last thing I want to talk about, because it is one that I don't like to link. I have always said that crime and criminology really should not be something that we politicize. It should not. It is something that affects us all, and it is something that requires all of us to do our part to ensure that we reduce the level of criminality that is happening around us. But if we are honest, and if we are truthful, though the levels of criminality seems to be inching up in Tobago, it is nowhere close to what we are seeing our brothers and sisters in Trinidad experiencing. So if we are to compare what, quote unquote, the government is doing as it relates to preventing crime and criminal activities, then we cannot pretend to care about it in Tobago and not use that same argument for our brothers and sisters in Trinidad who are experiencing way higher rates of criminal activity than we are. You can't be selective in your outrage. You can't be selective in your placement of blame. You can't be selective in your placement of who you think is responsible for these things. Now, Madam Presiding Officer, I recognized today that if I were to spend all of my time, as I have done in previous debates, rebutting what the minority says, that like the previous 2 years, I would really spend no time whatsoever speaking about the amazing work that's been happening at the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection and the Tobago Regional Health Authority. So I would let Tobago know, because I understand it was a talking point, that yes, the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, as it relates to proposed allocations, is getting or has been estimated to receive a really large sum, a big, Madam Presiding Officer, piece of the pie. And that is because the subvention that runs the entire Tobago Regional Health Authority, meaning what runs the hospital and the health centers and pays the doctors and the nurses and everyone that is part of the healthcare system, actually comes out of the subvention that goes to the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection. And as a result of that, as a result of us, in essence, handing over a check every single month of $42 million, $42 million is the value of the check that is handed from the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection over to the Tobago Regional Health Authority every single month to ensure that we are able to provide the kind of services that we've been able to provide. And that adds up to over $500 million every year, just that. And by the way, that does not include, because that is just recurrent, That does not include the monies that we need to spend, for example, to buy the new ambulances and to buy the new CT scans and to buy, that is just maintenance. And maybe it's good at this point, Madam Presiding Officer, for me to make that differentiation. Because the Tobago House of Assembly spends a significant chunk of the monies that are received from the central government on recurrent expenditure. Of the request made this time, $3.95 billion. Of that request, $2.81 billion is being requested because we simply have to pay people's salaries, because we simply have to keep the lights on, because we simply have to maintain the vehicles, because we simply have to do those types of work. And therefore, the request of a little over $1 billion for development work is what we are forced to then use to lift the island and to create the economic drive that's needed on the island. Which is why, Madam Presiding Officer, last year, when after all of the hooing and harring, after all of everything that was said and done, it was so disappointing, Madam Presiding Officer, that the Tobago House of Assembly only received a little over the $200 million, even though the request was as high as this year's request. We only received $200 and a little over million to do development work, and 260. And let us just take into consideration that the refurbishment of the Red House took about $200 million. Let us also consider 400. Let us also consider that the zoo, is it, was just refurbished, and I guess I need to take a visit to the zoo to see what was done there that cost $57 million. So let's just think about this Tobago. The whole Tobago, the whole island was allocated $260 million, but they chose to spend $57 million on a zoo. Let that sink in, Madam Presiding Officer. Let that sink in Tobago, which is why it is so difficult to sit here and listen to the members on the other side speak about all of the things that we did not do, all of the accomplishments that did not happen according to them, given that we were only given the $260 million when they are very willing to spend $57 million on, I guess, animals? I'm not sure. Tobago, think about that. So what are some of the things we are doing and some of the things we hope to continue to do? At the Tobago Regional Health Authority, we are now wrapping up a strategic and operational plan that would allow the organization to have very, very clear goals and objectives and so forth going into the next couple years. That activity will be quickly followed with one that allows the organization to have a set structure that makes sense for what the organization is there to do. So, for example, at this point, Madam Presiding Officer, when you ask the officers at the Tobago Regional Health Authority to show the structure, the approved structure that is on paper, and when you look at what actually is happening on the ground, the different positions that we have and the number of people in the different positions and so forth, the two do not match up. So the idea is we will take some time to think about what does healthcare look like? What should healthcare look like 20 years, 30 years down the road and create a structure that works for that, so that some of the things that the member opposite was talking about, we would be able to fit in seamlessly because it makes sense. Madam Presiding Officer, it's really, I'm excited to indicate that if everything goes as planned, that before the end of this calendar year, we would actually have 8 brand new ambulances landed in Tobago and in use for Tobago. And because we understand how this procurement works, there was an instruction to order 4 more one time. Let me wait. So, hopefully by the end of the next fiscal, we would have at least 12 brand new ambulances working on the ground in Tobago, and therefore we would be able to provide that kind of service. The member on the other side spoke about, I am not sure. So this is what happened, Madam Presiding Officer, when somebody gives you a speech. The member on the other side spoke about not knowing what these fancy surgeries are and why we're doing these fancy surgeries, and specifically identify the laparoscopic surgeries that we would be doing, and talking about whether we are ready for that and that kind of stuff. And you could tell that the member is not the one who did the speech. Because, well, apart from not being able to pronounce the word, if the member had simply done a Google search to show what laparoscopic surgery is, you would recognize that it's basically a little keyhole surgery. So it means instead of having to cut somebody the normal way you have to cut them, you can just do a little incision and use the tool to go in and do the surgery. Talking my business, at least 10 years ago, I did a surgery that was laparoscopic in Tobago. So this is not cutting edge. This is just us doing basic types of medical procedures that we are ensuring that what happens at Scarborough can be replicated at Roxborough when that facility is finally up and running. I am not going to spend any more time talking about the Roxborough Health Facility. Honestly, I'm tired. The question was asked at the last sitting, I think it was, or the sitting before that. I gave a very detailed explanation of what happened then. And this is why, Madam Presiding Officer, I'm saying to the people of Tobago that you need to be very careful of people who are willing to listen to the correct information and then come back a month or so after with the same incorrect information, even though they know that the words that are coming out of their mouth is a blatant untruth. The new initiative, though, that I would like to chat about really quickly as it relates to the Tobago Regional Health Authority is one where we are partnering with the TRHA and using some of the social protection component of the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, is that of a new initiative that we would like to include, which is that of a baby box. What does that mean? It means that currently, if you have a baby at the hospital, for example, and you happen to give birth on New Year's, Christmas Day, or Mother's Day, then you get a nice little hamper to go with. But we've recognized that in many instances, we are sending home mommies and babies and daddies, and they may not have all that they need to take care of the baby. So we will be initiating a baby box, which is, the name may be, Madam Presiding Officer, a little bit misleading because it's not just items for the baby, but it would also include items to ensure that mommy, having gone through this miraculous process of giving birth, is able to also take care of mommy's hygiene needs and so forth. So that is an initiative that I am, it's kind of near and dear to my heart because of the relief that we believe this will provide to the families that are going home with their charges. And the final thing that I want to talk about as it relates to the health component, Madam Presiding Officer, has to do with digitization of our services. I remember a couple years ago, Madam Presiding Officer, that my now deceased grandmother was hospitalized in a health facility in Florida. And I was able, in Tobago, to be able to log into their system and to be able to see that my grandmother had a medication at a certain time, that these were the things that were her issues, that this was, in very basic terms, her treatment plan, you know, that kind of thing. While in Tobago, I was able to log into a system to be able to see that about my granny. And it is where we are heading at the Tobago Regional Health Authority. We have already started the process and we already use some digital functions. For example, when you go to the pharmacy and you give them your prescription, the pharmacist types the prescription in, that information is digital. When you go to the lab, that information is digital. But when you are on the ward or in A&E, you realize that the doctors and nurses still have to write the medical records. So that is the step that we are going to add so that everything will be digital sooner rather than later. It's an Herculean task. It is one that is going to cost a whole lot of money, but I think it is an investment that is worth making for the healthcare system, for the people of Tobago. Allow me, Madam Presiding Officer, and I promise I will not be very long, to talk very quickly about the two other components that deal directly with the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection. The first has to do with our Public Health Department. Our Public Health Department is one that most people don't really think about, most people don't really, are not very familiar with. But public health, unlike medicine, treats with ensuring that we are all safe. They are the ones who are responsible for managing garbage collection, for managing vector control, for managing food safety, and those things. And while in Trinidad, we are seeing reports of, for example, cases of dengue and possible cases of malaria and those things. Because our Department of Public Health...
Member, you have 1 minute of speaking time.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. Because we have that cohesion between the Office of the County Medical Officer of Health, the Public Health Department, and the TRHA, we have actually implemented systems in Tobago that allow us to not have to treat with those issues right now. And specifically, I'm proud of the fact that we are months away from being able to have our vector lab, insect vector lab, and we have our public health individuals who are continually training to ensure that we can do the kind of testing to prevent us from having those cases of dengue and so forth on the island. One more quick thing, Madam Presiding Officer, as it relates to the Department of Social Protection. Of course, my colleague, Assistant Secretary Megan Morrison, at the last sitting spent quite a lot of time speaking about all of the work we have done there.
Member, your time has elapsed.
Madam Presiding Officer, I ask that an additional 10 minutes speaking time be granted to the member.
Honourable members, the question put is that an additional speaking time of 10 minutes be added to Assemblyman B.Yisrael presentation, to complete her presentation. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Member, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer, and I promise I will not use all 10 minutes. To wrap up for social protection, I was very proud to be able to pilot a project that the member opposite keeps speaking about, which is the case conferencing, which is where the social workers from across the Tobago House of Assembly collectively come together and speak about social cases. I have said it before, I am saying it now, but of course the member is not here again, so maybe next fiscal he will come with the same question. The case conferencing has actually been happening for at least a year now, where all of the social workers from the different health, social protection, settlements, education, the hospital, they all get together at least once a month, speak through and work through what is needed for cases, and they co-opt people as needed. So if there's a situation where there's a child, we may have to co-opt somebody from Children's Authority. If there's a situation where there's a legal thing, we may have to co-opt somebody from the police who come in and are part of the process. So let it be recorded on the Hansard for the member who is not here that the case conferencing mechanism that we spoke about quite some time ago has been happening and has been going on at the division for at least a year now, so that the member does not have to ask that question another time. I am asking, Madam Presiding Officer, that that specific piece be highlighted for the member. And the final thing, the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection has increased, as my colleague indicated, the REACH grant from $7,500 to $15,000. The reason I was late this morning, Madam Presiding Officer, is because the members of that unit specifically are actually at an event right now where the recipients of the REACH grant and other individuals who are business owners or who would love to get into the business are actually doing training right now to ensure that their businesses are successful. That training includes learning about business funding from NEDCO, learning about basic bookkeeping from the division with responsibility for finance, learning about banking for businesses with a rep from First Citizens, learning about registering your business with a rep from OPR. That is actually happening today, and that is because, Madam Presiding Officer, at the division, we are hoping to build resilience, which means that this program is aimed at ensuring that those who are vulnerable, those who come, for example, for the food card or the rental assistance or whatever it is, are able to get that seed business grant. And we're not just giving you the business grant, but we are providing the other technical support that you need to ensure that your business is well developed. With that, Madam Presiding Officer, I thought it important to simply highlight some of the areas that we are working on assiduously. I would also like, again, to thank the staff at the Tobago Regional Health Authority and the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection for all of their hard work, because it is their work. It is the work of all of my colleagues sitting around here. It is the work of every single Tobagonian recognizing our importance to allowing us in the Executive Council or in the executive of the THA to realize that vision that we have of Tobago, Madam Presiding Officer, which is making Tobago the greatest little island on the planet. And with everybody collectively, I see us realizing that dream within our lifetime, because we collectively did the work. I thank you.